The Ukrainians, as we know from this very well advertised Kursk offensive, have moved into taking some Russian territory, potentially as a bargaining chip, but also, probably most importantly, to try to get the Russians to move forces from the Eastern Front around to push the Ukrainians back. So effectively, it's a way to get the Russians to take some of their best forces, their most battle-ready troops, and redeploy them to take pressure off the Ukrainian Eastern Front.
There have been a lot of big developments over the summer: the incursion into Kursk, the sacking of the minister responsible for air after the destruction of a fighter jet, and also Russian advances elsewhere on the front line. Where do you think this war is now?
We're at a really busy stage for the next 2 months, because come October, November, the war is going to slow down. There will still be a lot of artillery shelling, but the maneuver period of the war will come to an end until the spring of next year. And I think both sides are working to potentially decisive outcome potentially next year. So the Russians want to take a town called Pokrovsk, which is a useful, important rail junction in the east, and they want to end the fighting summer on a high by taking that town. And the Ukrainians, as we know from this very well advertised Kursk offensive, have moved into taking some Russian territory, potentially as a bargaining chip, but also, probably most importantly, to try to get the Russians to move forces from the Eastern Front around to push the Ukrainians back. So effectively, it's a way to get the Russians to take some of their best forces, their most battle-ready troops, and redeploy them to take pressure off the Ukrainian Eastern Front. That's what's happening at the military end. Even more importantly, arguably, Adam, is what's happening in the electricity war. The Russian bombing has destroyed about 75–80% of Ukraine's energy capacity. They're destroying the power plants, they're destroying the major substations and some of the smaller substations. So effectively, they want Ukrainians to freeze over the winter and therefore to sue for peace. That's the thinking. I'm not saying it's going to work, but as well as destroying means, which is the physical army, they're also trying to destroy will, which is the will of the people here to continue fighting and not sue for peace, or indeed leave in their millions.
So interesting, Bob. And I know it's something that the new Labour government is also focused on here too, about support for Ukraine, and something that's likely to come up in the next couple of weeks. So we will follow it closely here on the programme. I want to talk to you about Kemi Badenoch, though, which might seem a million miles away to you given where you are and what you're focused on. But I know that you are supporting her.
Yeah.
You want to come on the programme to talk about why. She will be launching her pitch to become the next Tory leader. What kind of chance do you think she has?
I think she has a good chance. I mean, generally, front runners don't always do well in Tory leadership elections, but occasionally they do. And I hope this is one of the occasions where Kemi, if she is the front runner, is going to win. And I think, look, I can only speak for myself, but I think also a lot of Conservative members and a lot of Conservative voters would, I hope, agree with this, that actually the last government, despite a lot of achievements, it talked Conservative, but it didn't act Conservative often enough. And I think on a couple of big issues, especially immigration, we really lost our way. And Conservatives, they need to be Conservative, but they also need to be competent, and we need to be a team. I'm voting for Kemi because I think she's a conviction Conservative, and frankly, somebody with really strong convictions is what we need now to get us back to where we should be, and frankly, get us back to slightly questioning what we need to be doing to have a really good Conservative pitch in a few years' time to make sure that we can do our best to limit this pretty dreadful, already dreadful Labour government to a single term. I think, Kate, somebody just before I came on made a really good point. Labour got less than 34%. I'm not excusing our dreadful campaign and our dreadful performance, because we did even worse. But when you've had 14 years of Conservative government and less than 1 in 5 people voted for Labour, that tells you something about how keen people are on Keir Starmer. And frankly, I still don't know what Labour's agenda is. I really don't. I think there's an entitlement to power which is unattractive and which is arrogant, and I think which is really quickly going to make them come a cropper.
I had a text in here from Rod, who says that Kemi is the only contender many of us can see as the necessary Rottweiler at the dispatch box to challenge the government, which will be the main job for the next few years. Is that part of the attraction for you, that Kemi Badenoch does have a reputation for being a bit spiky at times? She can be, she's very forthright in her opinions. Is that something that you're looking for, that you think is important?
Yes. Do you want me to extend that answer?
Yes, I'd love you to.
we need somebody who's got the courage to question. We need somebody who's not just going to jump on bandwagons, but actually come to this with a slightly fresh start. We need to renew our party, and we need to do that not because the party needs renewal, because it does, but because it's a vehicle for renewing our country. And this last election, 60% of people, I think, voted, an incredibly low percent overall. And I think people are giving up on politics, and they're giving up on politicians because they don't see politicians as straight talking. They don't see politicians as honest, and they don't see politicians as actually speaking their opinion, but just in a rather vacuous and self-serving way, mirroring what they think tend to be what the sort of conventional wisdom is. And conventional wisdom amongst our media classes is very different from what many people out there in the real world are thinking and caring about. And I think we need somebody who's attached to the real world and not focused on pleasing the media. And
It's
I think
funny.
Kemi has the strength of character to actually say, how do we reach out to our Conservative vote? Half our vote went and voted for reform. And well, a third voted for reform, a third voted for us, and thank you for sticking with us, those who did, and voted for me in the island. Sorry, I couldn't win. And a third didn't bother to come out because they were so fed up. They didn't know what we stood for. And time again, on the doorstep, it was immigration.
Yeah.
And it was, you're not looking after us. There's money for everyone apart from the hardworking people in this country. And people are fed up. And frankly, I share that anger. And I want somebody who is not hail fellow. All the candidates have got their good points. I'm not going to criticize any of them. But somebody who's standout Conservative. I entered Parliament at the same time as Kemi Kate. And right from day one, she would question stuff. She would speak her mind, not in an arrogant, listen to me kind of way, but in a sort of, I'm here to serve. But my idea of serving is to say what I believe in and to argue my case. And because she came here from a socialist military dictatorship, I think she sees this country in a way that some of us don't always, and actually appreciates this country, our wonderful nation, in a way that some of us don't always. And I had that experience because I went and lived in the Soviet Union when I was young. And you really learn a love for your country when you're away from it, because you can see it in comparison with other things. And I think we need somebody who's a big patriot of this country, but also is willing to question and is willing to actually stand up for what she believes, and yes, be tough. So Kemi is a standout candidate from that point of view, and I really hope my colleagues, my ex-colleagues, recognise that, respect it, and put her through to the final two, and don't try to block her.
Well, I'm sure they've heard you, Bob. Very passionate defence case there for Kemi Badenoch. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And of course, we'll keep an eye on all of those leadership events in the first round of voting by MPs, which will happen this week, and we'll bring you live on Times Radio. Adam, interesting, though, that Bob Seeley, Tory, talking about Tory leadership race, repeatedly uses that word renewal, which is exactly what Lucy Powell was talking about when I asked her what Labour's big idea is. She was talking about renewal of the country. That's Labour's message. That's exactly what Bob Seeley says Kemi Badenoch's selling.
Well, I think that's because there is a general perception that things aren't going right at the moment, and therefore people want to make things better, to renew. And clearly a party that's been defeated in an election needs to renew itself. But Labour is talking about change and renewing the country. And you know, the themes that we're already coming back to is, and you know, this is one of the messages from Alf in Halifax. I mean, he actually says the last election ought to have been rerun with only 1 in 5 available voters backing them. How can the Labour Party claim to have any sort of mandate? Well, that is partly how electoral politics works, but Labour does need ultimately to get people saying, I'm glad I voted Labour, this is what happened. And in a sense, that's where at the moment, although we're very, very early stages, they seem to be struggling a bit.
Yeah, interesting to see what happens in this coming week.